Well, hello everyone. Good morning / afternoon, wherever you're visiting us from. My name is Dave Thielen. I'm Education Solutions Consultant for the Midwest and Great Lakes region with Smart Technologies. Don't worry, I'm not presenting. I'm not going to bore you all, but we have an amazing session today that's called Design Backwards, Teach Forward. So I'll give Sarah Rankin an opportunity to introduce herself as well, but she's going to be your presenter today. And I wanted to encourage you all today, before we get started, to take screenshots with anything that you see helpful or exciting. And we're going to have a social media challenge at the end of this presentation where you can share those ideas and thoughts and have an opportunity even to win a gift card today. Anything that is exciting or an opportunity for you to take back with you to your classroom, we want you guys to be able to take advantage of those things as well. And I'm also going to be assisting and manning the chat today. So if you have any wonderings, ideas, excitements, concerns, questions, please feel free to toss those into the chat, and I will relay those back to Sarah live, or I can answer those in the chat if we are able to. And then at the end of the session, we'll make sure to get you guys the form to fill out so that you guys can receive your certificate of completion. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Please give her a warm welcome. Please say hello in the chat, and we will go from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate that. Well, good afternoon, I guess, from me. I'm located on Canada's East Coast, all the way in St. John, New Brunswick. It's just after 2:30 here, so I'm really excited to be with you all. Hopefully we'll get my slide deck up here in just a second. There we go. Thank you so much. So yes, hopefully you are here for the session entitled Backwards Design, Teach Forward, Backward Design within Lumio. If you are not familiar with Backwards Design or UDL, do not worry. My plan is to walk through both of those concepts with you while we're looking at this together. Just a little bit about me first. Oh, my picture, there it goes. Thought I forgot that for a second. So as I said, my name is Sarah Rankin. I am an educational technology learning specialist. I work for my Ministry of Education here in New Brunswick. So I work with schools and leaders from all across my entire province. But I am based in St. John, New Brunswick, which is in the southern part of our province. Prior to my current role, I was a classroom teacher for around 10 years, mostly teaching elementary and middle school, a bit of French here, a bit of language arts there, a bit of math. And then I became an instructional technology coach for my school district. Shout out to Anglophone School District South. I did that for 4 years, which is where I really started to build up a lot of my skills with Lumio. And right now I am part of the digital learning and system excellence team for my Ministry of Education. I've been doing that for about 3 years. And part of my role is, while I'm also a learning specialist, I also lead something called the Center of Excellence for Digital Innovation, which is an organization that works within our ministry that links our K-12 system with industry and post-secondary to open up career and post-secondary opportunities for our learners. I was recently awarded the Public Sector Transformation Award from Innovate New Brunswick. And when I'm not busy with all of that, you will find me with my 2 fur babies, Ada, who is my almost 5-year-old Siberian Husky, and Babbage, who is my 2-year-old Black Canadian House Panther, aka just a black cat. So let's move on into our agenda today. So the first thing we're going to be going through is we're going to first off just understand what the 3 stages of backward design really are and what is their relationship to UDL, the Universal Design for Learning. Then after that, we're going to look at how does backward design actually support diverse learner needs and how we can use it to plan strategically to help our learners. And it's a good thing to remember that these things are good for all learners. So even if you're not working with students who are on what we in New Brunswick would call a personalized learning plan, maybe in your region it is called an SEP or an IEP, these are things that are great for all learners across the board. And then finally, we're going to learn how to apply those principles to create lessons that are more inclusive. So the first thing I want us to think about is these questions regarding instructional design as a whole. So the first one I want to put out there, and feel free to toss your answers into the chat just to get a little bit of conversation happening in there. How might starting with activities instead of goals actually limit student success? My other question to you is, what barriers do traditional lessons that you may find either coming out of your curriculum or maybe even coming out of some of those resources that we see online through different edu influencers, or possibly even the ones that are getting generated by artificial intelligence now, actually potentially limit our diverse learners and create barriers? And then finally, how can assessment as a tool, how can the design of it influence the effectiveness of instruction? So I just want to put those out there as thought pieces. If you have an answer, you can put it into the chat, or if you just want to mull this over while I'm going through my presentation, both are wonderful. So what I want to start out with this is I'm actually going to open this up as something to work on together a little bit. So this is just one example of an option within Lumio to capture some of this learning. So this is actually a handout, and you should be able to click on this in your own, if you're signed into my class, which you see there's about 13 people who have hopped into my lesson with me, which is fantastic. So you should have this as a handout for yourself. So if you want to use that to brainstorm on, what's really cool about these, as far as when I think about UDL and when I think about backwards design, is that opportunity to really use all those tools to explain your learning. So maybe putting something in the chat is the barrier. Maybe that student is not at a point with their literacy skills that they can type something into the chat, or that maybe there's no, and this happens a lot with some edu tech devices, is there's no way for them to speak to what they're thinking about, or maybe there's a better way for them to communicate. But this little handout is just one option, and I can actually click this open, and maybe I'll see if there's any people who have gotten started in here. It doesn't look like it yet, which is fine. We're taking things in our own time and progress, which is great. But that's something I would encourage you to check out, is that handout feature or whiteboard feature inside of Lumio. It's a great way to capture student learning and understanding in like a little snapshot way that means they can put something in there that otherwise they may not be able to communicate. Oh, see, somebody's typing in theirs. We got some typing as well. Very good. Awesome. Love that. So let's just slide on back here. So this is what you should see. Let's just go back into my slide deck. Oh, we got somebody who's writing theirs out. Fantastic. Goals encourage. I'm just going to fly this one up here. Goals encourage creativity. 100% agree with you on that one, that if we can think about what the goal is, it really opens up not just the creativity for the teacher to think differently, but also for our learners to explore their own creativity in novel ways. So thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. You'll notice I have blurred the name, so don't worry. I'm not going to call anyone out. Let's take a peek at it. Students have individual goals. Exactly. All of our students should have their own individual goals. And while that sounds really, really challenging to address, well, what if I've got 32 students in my classroom and they all have different goals? Well, that really is the reality of education. We are working with individuals. We are working with children and students and young adults who are unique in their goals and their interests and their pathways. So it is true. We do need to think about our students as individuals. And I'll just pop in one more here and see what we've got. They keep students and the teacher accountable and on track. Very true. And that is so important. Not only our learners' accountability to their learning and to make sure that they understand the progress that they're making, but as a teacher, as an instructor, we also need to make sure that we're accountable to our students and that we are encouraging them to learn. And yeah, not many lessons have multiple modalities. That is really the biggest struggle here. And that's when we're getting into UDL. So let's just hop into what is UDL to begin with. So here in New Brunswick, UDL is really the backbone of everything that we do in our classrooms and in our system. We're really lucky that we have people who work with me at the ministerial level who are pros at UDL and help drive our system forward. We've developed provincial resources around UDL, and it really does form the core of what we do. So if you're not familiar with UDL, this is really the document that you want to have. And it comes from CAST. These are their UDL guidelines. These are the most recent ones. I'll move this out of the way so people can see the full thing. They did just recently revise these a little bit. So this is called the UDL guidelines 3.0. And so what you essentially have is you have multiple means of engagement. So multiple ways for the students to feel like their interests are part of what they're learning, that their identity is recognized. It allows for sustaining of effort and making sure that they're persistent in their learning, that they have that grit in their learning, that they're in. We all know that the important part of learning is friction. There has to be a little bit of friction in order for learning to happen. And then there's that designing for emotional capacity, where we're trying to make sure that they're aware of who they are, but also aware of the world around them, and promoting individuality. When we get into multiple means of representation, what does that mean? Well, that means that we're looking at not just allowing our students to represent their learning in multiple ways, but that we are representing the learning as teachers in a bunch of different ways. So we're using maybe different language or different vocabulary. So if one word doesn't work, try to flip the vocabulary to find a new word. Using symbols and decoding to open up the context of the word. We're building knowledge to cultivate multiple ways of knowing and making meaning. We're looking at the perception piece too. We're supporting that way of perceiving the information from multiple angles. And then finally, we have multiple means of action and expression. And again, this is not just the student having multiple means of expressing themselves, but also making sure that as the teacher, as the instructor, that you have found multiple means of expressing the learning as well. So we're designing options that are various ways of interacting, not just with their peers, but interacting with the topic at hand. Options for expressing and communicating. So not just communicating back and forth, but how can the student communicate what they've learned in multiple ways? And how is the teacher communicating the learning in multiple ways? And then finally, the options for strategy development, so that they're setting meaningful goals in a way that is going to help them both address those barriers, but also anticipate the barrier too. And I think that's the biggest challenge sometimes, is how do you anticipate a barrier if you don't know that it exists? So now we're getting into backwards design. So backwards design is this component of UDL. It is this part of it of how do I create a learning environment, a lesson, an activity, an opportunity, an experience for my learners that is UDL and that gets to the goal. So this is where backwards design comes into play. And there's these 3 stages of it. So that first stage, you are really just trying to figure out what is the desired result. What is it that you need your student, your learner to develop an understanding of? And what are those essential questions that need to be answered? And usually for stage 1, we're going straight for either that, in New Brunswick, our PLP, our personalized learning plan, because that is where the student goal is. If you are not using PLPs, maybe you're IEP school, then you're looking at that IEP and asking what is the individualized goal for that learner. If they're not on a PLP or IEP, well, then this becomes really the curriculum. This becomes what is the goal within the curriculum. The stage 2 part is determining what is the evidence that the learning has happened, and how do we authentically assess that? And then finally, that third step is planning the learning experience. So before you even started thinking about what is the activity that my students are going to do, what is the experience that they're going to have in the classroom, before we even touch that, going to the goal first and the assessment. What is the goal that needs to be learned, and how am I going to assess it? So breaking this down, we're just going to talk about stage 1 to begin with. So we're going to identify the goal. So again, this could be your curriculum. So depending on how your curriculum is laid out, this could be a GCO or SEO, a specific curricular outcome or a general curriculum outcome. In New Brunswick, we call them achievement indicators and skill descriptors. So whatever your curriculum is, that is the one that you're going to use for those students that may not be on an adjusted or an accommodated or modified plan of some sort. If they are on one, then you might want to look to that. So you're going to look at your PLP, you're going to look at the SEP, whatever it might be. If they are, you may want to lean on to your resource or resource and methods teacher to help you out with that. Something that I used when I was in the classroom, I used data notebooks a lot. Each of my students had their own, I'll use a Canadian term here, so I apologize, but each student had their own duotang, which is basically what I think in other places is called a file folder. But inside of it was ways of tracking their progress. And so it was evidence of their learning. It was where they're at with their goal, how much progress have they made towards that goal. And I met with my students probably once a month to go through and review their data notebook with them. And that really helped me with the backwards design piece, is understanding where was my kid in that moment. You also want to consider developmental appropriateness though too. So sometimes we want kids to move faster than they're ready to move. And while it's, it's always tempting to kind of, move fast and do something that maybe it's a little bit outside the box, we also need to make sure, is this appropriate for them? Is this appropriate for a kindergartner? Is this appropriate for a grade 5 student or a high schooler? And knowing the kid is really essential there. Not every single high schooler, not every single middle schooler, et cetera, is going to be at the same developmental progress. So really getting to know the kid and what they're ready for is super crucial here. And the key question to ask yourself when you're going through this first stage of backwards design is, what do you want the kid to know? What do you want the student to understand? And what is it that you want them to be able to do? What is the skill? So something that I found really helpful with this inside of Lumio, and hopefully the image flies up here in a second. My goodness, it's a little laggy today. Let me just see if I can't get it. There it goes. I had to click forward and backwards for a second. Is the AI assistant that is now inside of Lumio. I know this is not a new thing, but it's relatively new for some people. But what I love about it is that it leads with the learning objective first. And not a lot of AI embedded features do that. They tend to think, well, what is it that you just want to create? Well, I want to create a multiple choice thing. I want to create a learning activity that has an essay to it. But that doesn't always tie into what the student needs to learn. So the fact that within Lumio, if I want to create a lesson for that child, for that group of students, for that cluster, that cohort, I can look at my data notebook, I can look at my curriculum, I can look at their personalized learning plan, and I can say, here's the objective, here's the standard. Often what I tell teachers is go to your curriculum, wherever it may be. For us in New Brunswick, we have a website. It's a public website that anybody can access. It's curriculum.nbed.ca. I tell them, go to the website, find your curriculum, copy and paste that achievement indicator, paste it in. And then from there, you can choose grade level, language, whatever else you may need, and that will get you started. So really encourage you to check that feature out as part of that first step in your backwards design journey. And I'll just pause there for a second in case there are any questions. I know Dave's watching the chat from me, which thank you very much. And I've been seeing little comments pop up in here, and that's really, really cool. But if there's any questions, I'll just give it like a little 1 minute pause here to breathe and to see if there's any questions. Not seeing any, and I'm not hearing from Dave, so we will press on. So now we're into stage 2, the assessment. We've identified the goal. Now we need to identify how we're going to assess the goal. So this is where we want to think, what is a student designed solution to a problem? What is the student's growth portfolio, and how can we use those as means of collecting evidence of learning? Experiential learning is a big one. I'm really passionate about experiential learning. That is what I do a lot through the Center of Excellence for Digital Innovation, where we take students out of the classroom and we bring them into post-secondary institutions, or we bring them to job sites and we bring them into a career so that they can become more familiar with what it looks like to be in that world. And the key question to ask ourselves here about this second stage of finding that acceptable evidence is, what is the evidence that's going to help determine how much progress has been made? So not just that there has been progress, but how much progress has been made towards that learning objective. So something that I've found has helped here, and again, this is another feature that's inside of Lumio, is just graphic organizers. Plain straightforward graphic organizer. And these can be done digitally if you want, like I've got here in front of me with this sheet inside of Lumio. I can print this off. I can have this as a physical copy, which goes into that multiple modes of UDL. I want to make sure that if my student can't access it through a digital means, that I have that paper copy available for them. Or I might provide, like it has here, instead of just a title to say, well, what is the ideation? What is the prototype? This is a format that we use. Oh, I'm seeing some problems in the chat. Dave, are we good? Can I be heard? I'm seeing people saying that they've lost connection and that they can't hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you right now.
Okay.
So we're all good on that end, but I'm going to let the team know, and hopefully we can square away a few of those connection issues for our friends here. Sorry about that, team.
Great. Good to know. Sarah says that she can hear and see me, so that's good. Thank you, Sarah. So this is just another way of going about it. And again, I might change this up depending upon the student. For this one, I put the questions in there to help them think a little bit. So something else in New Brunswick that we're really passionate about is design thinking. And so this is what this template actually is. This is our design thinking template. I just modified it to fit inside of a Lumio slide deck. So something like this, I would hand out to students. I would have it accessible digitally so they can play with that. Something that I would do here, depending upon, again, the goals of the student and what it is that I'm trying to assess, is similar to the handout I created earlier, is transform this into either a handout if it is something I want them to work on by themselves, or a group workspace if maybe the goal is working with others. In New Brunswick, again, we have our global competencies, we have our digital literacy framework, and in both of those, collaboration and communication are huge pillars. So if that's part of our goal, is to work collaboratively and to learn to communicate with others, I would transform this into a group workspace. I could also make this a whole class whiteboard, maybe working on like a big project together. That might be a little bit risky one right now. I don't know how many people in the call. If I tried to open this up to the whole class, it might get a little crazier. I did see a question in here from Binta. Will this work with younger students, grades 3 to 5? That's a really great question. I would say yes, because I taught grade 5 for most of my career when I was in the classroom, and I used this with grade 5 students. The trick there is be prepared to have to do some prep in advance with them, because they may not have the digital literacy skills to navigate just yet. You also need to be aware of what's happening inside your classroom. I was lucky that at the time I was in a school where we had access to iPads, and I could borrow those iPads when I knew I was going to be doing a lesson in Lumio. And I would always make sure that it wasn't one kid, one iPad. I tried to get them working together. Again, going to our digital literacy framework, collaboration is huge for us. And I would say, yes, just be prepared to kind of coach them through a little bit more than maybe what an older student is going to need. So that is something I would just check out for sure when we're thinking about how do I collect this evidence. I would look into the graphic organizer, and then how do I share this out? Is it group? Is it individual? Is it whole class? And do I put these little full labels on it? Do I add questions? What else could I include in here? I would probably include some images depending upon the student. That way, what does empathize mean? What does it look like? What does a prototype look like?
Can I hop in really quick just in reference to the 3rd through 5th grade classroom question? As a previous 3rd grade teacher, and similar to just to chime off of what you said, Sarah, I would give students the opportunity to play with and explore the tools, especially on the sidebar, because similar to what Sarah's sidebar shows as the teacher, students are going to have access to similar tools on their end, and just giving them an opportunity to play and explore and learn how to use the tools before you're expecting them to complete something like a graphic organizer, and then they love it and roll with it. And the engagement that you're going to see when utilizing an independent handout is far different than what you might see by just asking students a question and having a few friends raise their hand. So just wanted to chime in there, Sarah. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I really appreciate that, Dave. As a fellow elementary teacher, I appreciate the backup. So yes, and I can understand like the younger kids, sometimes it takes them longer to access things, and they do need a little bit more time to figure it out sometimes. But that's not to say that they can't do it. If we kind of just fly back here for a second, we talked about developmental appropriateness, right? So if it's developmentally appropriate for that third grader, great. You may have a third grader that this is not appropriate for them just yet, but you can help them build the skills to get ready for it. And that's what we do in education. We help our students build skills. So we can't just say, well, they're not ready for it right now, so they'll never be ready for it. They're not ready for it now. What can I do to get them to the point? That's a good point. But if your students are lacking in that fundamental literacy piece, what are the other options for them? I do know, and I don't like doing things on the fly live, but there is a way to add in like an audio feature as well. So you could record your voice with the instructions inside of a Lumio slide deck and use that instead of text. All right, I'm getting all excited and bamboo and sidetracked here. Let me forge ahead. Finally, to our last step, our third step in the backwards design is just planning that experience. You've got your goal figured out. You know how you're going to collect evidence of it existing. Now you just have to plan it out. So making sure that the practice is scaffolded is really important. So it's not just one and done. It's this experience is designed to help that student get from point A to point B in their goals. Modeling is super important here. You have to sort of demonstrate the goal a little bit, demonstrate what it could look like, and then gradually release so that they can achieve that goal. Formative checkpoints are huge. And this is what we're going to get into next, is a little bit about designing a formative checkpoint that allows them to course correct. So instead of it just being, here's a random multiple choice with some different answers, we're going to be kind of picky about our multiple choice. And the key question here is, what barriers have been addressed to ensure that the pathway to learning and assessment is there? So talking about course correction. So this is a really fascinating piece I find inside of backwards design, and it tends to kind of get skated over sometimes. People like to poo-poo the multiple choice. I don't. I think multiple choice is a fantastic way of assessing students. But what happens is we tend to get the design of multiple choice questions wrong. We put our correct answer in, and then what we do with the wrong answers is we think, well, it doesn't really matter because they're the wrong answer. The goal is to get the right answer. But there's a huge missed opportunity in there when we just think that the wrong answers are not important. The wrong answer can actually give us just as much information about what the child needs and has learned than the right answer does. And that's what we really need to be critical of, is when you're choosing that option, making sure that the wrong answers are designed in a way that gives you a bit of an insight into maybe why they got it wrong and what they're thinking. So for example, this question up here, teacher is planning a new unit. Following backwards design, what should they define first? The activities, the desired result, the textbook chapters and the content, or the summative test? So I made us a little response thing here. So I'll put this up for you if you're logged in. I see there's about 14 people in the class right now. And let's just see what people think. Oh, 14% have answered, 21%. I love this little spinny wheel. I love a good visual. I'm a sucker for a good visual. Oh, 50%, we're halfway there. We'll see if we can get the other 50%. We'll see if we can close the loop. 64%. Oh, hopefully we're not stuck. 71. 73. Oh, we might be stuck. Oh, 80, we almost got there. 20% more, and we're almost there. We may be stuck at 80. That's okay. That's all right. Oh, 87. My gosh, every single time I think we're going to have to move on, I get one more in there. See if we can close the loop. Let's look at our live results. So most people are saying B. We got a couple saying D. That's okay. So I'm going to click end and review here because I don't know if we're going to get this loop closed, which is fine. Oops, I think I got that one wrong. There we go. So let's look at these. So the correct answer was B. I apologize for the glitch in my slide deck there. So good job for those of you who picked B. But here's the thing. Just because some of them picked D, that's not a bad thing because that tells me exactly maybe where they missed a point, where they missed something in the learning process. So while B is the correct answer, A, if a student had selected A, that's going to tell me that they actually jumped right out to stage 3. And that's probably out of habit. Most teachers, they tend to jump to stage 3. I have to find a really fun activity for my kids to do. So I'm going to find a cool activity online and we're going to do that, not even thinking about what the goals are. If they chose C, well, that's a coverage orientation issue. They are mistaking content being covered with learning being designed. And then D, if D got chosen, again, not necessarily a bad thing because it's telling me that they jumped to stage 2, that they didn't get to the goal first, they went straight to the assessment piece, which as teachers, depending upon what context you're working in, that might be the thing that you have been trained to do is, well, I have to develop assessment first. I have to develop the assessment first. But if you haven't been trained to think about the learning goal first, then that is where you're going to go. So again, designing so that we can course correct our students and identify based on the wrong answer, what we need to do with them next. So think about that when you are working in multiple choice and really celebrate the multiple choice. It is a wonderful way of assessing students if designed appropriately. And I know we're getting tight on time here. So I'm just going to jump over a few things here. So again, course correction. So keep in mind, when it comes to UDL, a lot of people will say, well, UDL is about offering students choice. And that's only kind of partially correct. Choice is only UDL if it helps to remove that barrier to learning. If those choices don't actually link up with what the child needs to be learning, then it's not UDL. I know a lot of people, I used to love a choice board. I used to do choice boards every single week with my students. And I think back on them and I do kind of cringe a little bit because I don't know if I was doing it out of a place of, well, I'm just trying to give my kids some options versus why am I giving them those options? Does it link to anything that we are trying to learn? The trick is when the obstacle becomes predictable and knowable. So for example, if your student has been diagnosed with something, they have gone through in New Brunswick, and I'm assuming in other places, in order to get diagnosed, they have to go through a psychiatric education evaluation where they get, diagnosed with dysgraphia or dysnuria, or they get diagnosed with an auditory processing disorder. Those obstacles, if you don't know them, if you don't know that it exists, they can be really tricky to figure out, well, how do I design for that obstacle? But that's where UDL comes into play. If you're using UDL, then you kind of have to worry, not at all, but maybe worry a little bit less about whether or not you're getting all those pieces for your students. And then just as a little piece there, UDL, it's proactive. Rather than being reactive, oh my gosh, my student has this struggle, now I'm going to react to it. UDL is proactive. It's addressing that barrier in advance so that every single child in your classroom can learn equitably. So as a final reflection piece, just to think, 1, what's the desired result? What is it that your student needs to learn? That's the first question right out of the gate. What do they need to learn? The second question is, what is the evidence? How do I get that authentic evidence that they're moving towards the goal? How do I collect that? How do I use it? And then finally, have the obstacles been addressed? If you're designing through UDL and using backwards design, most likely you're going to address most of those obstacles. I understand that there are going to be tertiary and secondary obstacles that we just can't address through what we're doing because they're beyond the scope of what an educator can change and influence day to day. But ultimately, has the assessment been designed to remove the barriers that would normally exist to learning in the classroom? All right, I'm going to pause it there and see if there are any questions before I continue to zoom.
Awesome, Sarah. No, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And I don't mean to cut you off at all. I want to make sure that we have a quick chance to answer any questions. If there's anything in the chat, please feel free to toss those in. Sarah, do you mind resharing your screen really quick, just so that way we can see the Becoming a Lumio Ambassador page? I just wanted to highlight that really quick. If you're interested, there's tons of resources online and also opportunities for you to become a Lumio ambassador. And that is really an amazing tool to put into your kit to be able to support others, not just yourself, and utilizing Lumio. And then, Sarah, if you can progress one more slide for me. We're also doing a little bit of a challenge. I mentioned taking screenshots in the beginning of anything that you were thinking about or learning. If you just post that screenshot along with one of these optional prompts and hashtag LumioPalooza at pretty much any social media feed, whether it's Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, you'll be entered into a contest to win a $25 e-gift card of your choice. So please take advantage of that if you would like to as well.
So I did see a question here from Sheila wondering, is there a specific tool that I can promote that helps with backwards design? Now, while I don't have any one particular tool that I use for this, because UDL isn't a tool, it's a framework for teaching and learning. What I will do, and I prepped this in advance because I was thinking ahead here, is I can share, if I can find it, my goodness, I have a link that hopefully I can find, maybe not, but I will just try to search it up really quickly here, and I apologize. I can share with you the website that we use here in New Brunswick to basically give our teachers all the information they need about UDL. Maybe it's over here, one second. UDL, New Brunswick, oop, there. I think I had it there for a hot minute. There it is. I don't know if that's visible or not, but this is our website that we use for UDL. I did not build this. My beautiful, lovely colleague, Heather, built this. She is a rock star. So this is the website that we publicly have available, and I will copy and paste and put that into the chat for everybody. So take a look at that if you're looking to learn more about UDL in general. There are a couple of good resources on there as well around designing, backwards design as well. The other one that I will recommend is really anything by an author named Caitlin Tucker or Katie Novak, one or the other. They are really amazing leaders in the UDL world. Anything by them, pick it up and read it. The one that I'm reading right now is actually right beside me, is this one here. It's called Elevating Educational Design with AI. I do a lot of work around artificial intelligence right now within my Ministry of Education, and we're trying to approach it in a way that is, student-centered, that is human-focused and learning-focused, not just tools and chatbots and yeehaw.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your time today. This was amazing. Our feedback so far in the comments, very informative. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise on UDL. Abby also just shared the feedback form, which will also give you a bit of learning side of the comment. We did have a question about when is going to be accessible to them. If you don't know the answer to that, I will make sure I get the answer to everyone that participated today.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was wondering about that. My slide deck was going to be available to them. I know I've shared it with you, Dave. I know I've shared it with a couple of different people. So
yes, so we have it. Just got to get clarity, but yeah, we'll make sure we get that to our participants today as well after the session's concluded. But yeah, thank you all so much for your time, Sarah. Anything else before we wrap things up here?
Just thank you all for joining. I'm seeing a few familiar faces who have popped into the chat, which is really good. I'm also a Lumio ambassador. I've been involved with this Lumio and smart community for longer than I'm willing to admit, but my hair may reveal. So I just really appreciate, the Lumio and Smart team for inviting me to present again at Lumiopalooza, and I appreciate everybody attending today.
Amazing. Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you again, everyone, for participating today.